join us, together with the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Mr. Harlem Desir, who will make a review and an overview of the conference and give a highlight of some of the issues discussed and recommendations that we have looked into over the last 2 days. So without much further ado, I would like to ask His Excellency Minister Maciejewski to take the floor. Minister.
Добър ден на сите. Благодарам.
Good day, everyone, and thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to address this forum. I was asked to speak in Macedonian because everybody from Macedonia spoke in Macedonian, otherwise we could have used English. Mr. Desir, dear representatives of media, and dear all, allow me first of all to thank for the ongoing support that the OSCE mission to Macedonia, but also the Vienna office, provides to the government of Macedonia in all reform processes. But I would also like to thank particularly for the support that we receive in the area of information society and administration on an ongoing basis, more specifically also in the area of amending the law on audio and audiovisual media services and the media law. Recently, we had frequent cooperation with Mr. Desir's office. He was our guest once already in Macedonia. Obviously, he likes it here, and therefore the organization of this event is taking place here. And it is a pleasure for us to be hosts to journalists and media workers from across the region. I hope you had a nice time in the past 2 days here in Struga on Lake Ohrid, but let's do some more work before the end of this event and conference. As I said, we had an ongoing communication with the OSCE with regards to the amending of the law on audio and audiovisual media services. And from the communication, thus far, I can say that we came to a joint position on how important it is to have strong media position, independent public broadcaster, and what are the necessary reforms in the media sphere in Macedonia. This is something that we do jointly with all stakeholders involved in the process of drafting the legal amendments. Free, safe, independent, but also responsible media are the basis for the development of any democratic society. The media are the mirror in which the democracy in a society, in a state, reflects. An attack to freedom of media is a direct attack to the rule of law and human rights. And therefore, the free media are part of our pledges for responsible work and checks and balances. The public is the best control mechanism and control of the government, and this can't be regulated in any law. Standards on reporting in Macedonia about the situation in Macedonia were below any standards, and this was a result of pressure and corruption with merciless spending of citizens' money. And that contributed to the disruption of basic human rights in Macedonia. Everything went. Some media were even main promoters of hate speech. There was no threshold below they could not go. And this is why the international reports ranked Macedonia as a country that was not free with regards to media. From the position 34, we fell down to the position 180 in terms of freedom of media. And the contents, the titles, even the arrangement of news, sequence of news were unified and sent to the media directly from the cabinet of the former prime minister. Especially we from Macedonia must not forget what state we are coming from, what situation we are coming from. And faced with this, the government is aiming to create space for objective informing of the citizens. Our aim is to have Macedonian radio television as a fully independent media, and that the regulatory bodies are professional and competent. It is especially important that in the regulatory bodies and in the national broadcaster there is no presence of political representatives, as was the case before and happens still. The regulatory bodies of the Macedonian radio television should be left to the media workers. Media should be left to the media workers. Broadcasters should have equal treatment to develop healthy competition amongst themselves. Our pledges are that the regulatory bodies have a possibility to perform their tasks free from any political influence. That is our commitment. They could be free in a very proactive way, without political influence, without political censorship, and what is most important, without self-censorship. The amendments to the law on audio and audiovisual services prepared together with all stakeholders guarantee prerequisites, but just prerequisites for professionalization of the media bodies. There is no guarantee. They allow for free operation of the media in the state if they choose to be free. But what is most important, they give a chance to us, the politicians, to remove our hands from the media. All politicians who are sincere about this should immediately support this law. The media community should undertake the control over the media sector. This law allows for self-regulation mechanisms, and the pledges to strengthen the capacities of the public broadcasters are part of the OSCE activities in Macedonia, for which I'm really glad, and they are also part of our priorities. So as you already know, the government abolished the broadcasting fee, and we freed citizens from an additional expenditure, but what is most important, we secured stable and predictable funding for the public broadcaster. There are completely legitimate arguments that this way of financing from the budget is not good. But in Macedonia, we have witnessed many other mechanisms that failed miserably. Macedonian radio television is stuck in debt, and the trust of citizens in it is almost inexistent. What I can say so far is that this model of funding from the budget is working. I didn't hear from you any complaints about political pressure on my part, because my signature is transferring the money. Nor has anyone else complained. Never did I pick the phone, nor do I intend to pick a phone and call anyone from the national broadcaster. But I will always be here if I can be of any assistance to them in what they are doing, to the present leadership and to any future leadership of the Macedonian television. We discussed this with Mr. Desir some months ago, and we agreed that for a professional broadcasting service, it is most important that the model of funding does not put its independence at risk. And this model might be a temporary but good solution to stabilize the situation in the public broadcaster. And in the context of strengthening the capacities of the public broadcaster, we are proposing to introduce a fourth channel that will broadcast programs of the ethnic communities in Macedonia. And we are aware that as a state, establishing of a new channel will be a challenge for the public broadcaster, and therefore it is very important that the OSCE channel, in terms of capacity building, and especially these newsrooms in Macedonian television, remains in place. The second channel was the only opportunity for the newsrooms of minority communities to present their programs with very limited financial, technical, and human resources capacities. But once the fourth channel is introduced, professionalization of the community's programs is expected, with the aim of objective informing that will be for the benefit of the citizens. At the moment, the law is in the parliamentary procedure, and I still believe that the colleagues from the opposition will see the need to pass this law as soon as possible. But yesterday we witnessed a debate on the amendments in the Committee on Transport and Communications in the Parliament, where the opposition MPs were against a public debate in the process of selecting representatives or members of the regulatory bodies. They were against public presentation of the candidates for members in the agents of the Council of the Agency for Media Services and in the Programming Council of the Macedonian Television. To be against transparency and publicity in the selection of regulatory bodies is to be against the main democratic principles and to be against freedom of media. And we must not allow this. Never again can we allow that politicians learn about the decisions after they adopted. And I hope that the opposition will realize this soon. Today you talked about digitalization and freedom of speech. Digitalization is a topic where I feel I'm on my turf, and this is why in the next hour I will present 73 graphs. Digitalization, I was only joking, is one of the strategic commitments in Macedonia in general, but digitalization, and more specifically the speed the digitalization brings, makes us work fast. We must not allow it to influence our professionalism. Anyone with an internet connection and with an ordinary mobile phone can publish anything from anywhere. But this is not journalism. When the journalists and editors ignore their responsibility to confirm their stories, to verify their stories and to report accurately, they are undermining the integrity of their profession and the trust of the citizens. And I will follow up on the second discussion that you had on the topic today, dealing with the fake news. This global theme was part of the digital summit that we had in Skopje some weeks ago, where experts and journalists were discussing the new challenges to deal with the phenomenon of fake news. According to some recent researches and analysis, what is behind the fake propaganda are usually state bodies from various states. But of course, fake news might also be profit motivated. And therefore, coordinated and specific steps must be taken by the states, by the countries to combat the fake news. What is proposed and what the state institutions should do are the following steps. First, proactive and greater transparency and openness. Secondly, direct communication with the citizens, of the institutions with the citizens, including through social networks. Thirdly, raising the level of trust of citizens to the institutions. Fourthly, introducing media literacy programs in the educational process. 5, security analysis of bot networks on social networks, and recognizing and analyzing the digital propaganda and its systemic prevention through anti-propaganda steps. To be honest, personally, I don't trust fact-checking. Some might agree with me, some might not, but I think that this is impossible. Fact-checking is a reactive tool. It is post festum when it is already late, and technically it is very difficult to implement it. And in the end, what is the supreme authority that will say what is the fact and what is the truth and where the border of censorship lies? What Macedonia is doing at the moment is at the level of increased and active transparency in the work of institutions. This type of work is based on 3 main principles, 3 pillars: democratization of the media landscape, active transparency, and increased access to information. What does it mean specifically? Regarding the first part, the government stopped all government advertising and started applying the democratic communication service, which means equal access of all medias and accurate and timely answers to all questions. Active transparency is also important. Agendas and minutes of government sessions are published, as well as rules of the government, ministries, institutions. We are even publishing if I have coffee with someone and how much I paid for the coffee. Published are also contracts through the Public Procurement Bureau, and they are published even before they enter into force. And the third pillar is access to public information, which means disclassification of information, abolishing the fee for the applicants who wish to receive public information, amending the law, free of charge use of the central register and catasta for journalists and media workers. Our way of thinking goes in the opposite direction of the one before. Not what information to publish, but the other way around. What information must not be published The only reason is national security. Anything else must be published. Anything else is public and belongs to the citizens. Dear media representatives, to have full improvement of the media landscape in Macedonia, law is not sufficient alone. It takes involvement of all stakeholders, and I wish to emphasize the importance of this and to salute your engagement in the debates, public meetings and discussions pertaining to the amending of the law on audio and audiovisual media services. And I'm saying this often. What I could see is that you did not do this due to selfish reasons. You are sincerely concerned about the situation, and you are sometimes trying to help the public broadcaster, although you come from the private media, and this really should be saluted. Media and media workers are the ones who need to be the driving agent for the changes, and the state is here just to open the room for discussions and to channel your recommendations and your critique. We must not bring ourselves into a situation where, due to the violation of media freedoms, we, the politicians, parties, and the international community will decide on the media, as was the case in the recent 2 or 3 years. Media must really be up to their task and to gain and preserve trust of the citizens. Let us not forget that the role of the media is not just to report. Through this, they are motivating the people to be a constant check and balance for the government, and the good governance and freedom of media are mutually dependent. Only when the journalists have room to work freely, to observe, to ask questions, and to inform without fear of any pressure or threats, only then will the citizens be certain that the decision makers will abide by their highest standards. To put it differently, as long as we are afraid of you, you should not be afraid of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister Machevski. Now it's my pleasure to invite the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Mr. Alem Desir, to give his concluding remarks and overview and view of the conference priorities and recommendations.
Thank you, Frane. Mr. Minister, dear Damian Manchevski, dear colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. First, thank you, Damian, for joining us this morning for the conclusion of this conference and for giving us first-hand very important information about the reforms which are ongoing in Macedonia in the field of media law and in the organization of the media landscape. I think this is very important for the country, but also for the whole region, and this will be very inspiring, I'm sure, for all of us. It has been my pleasure to be here for the last 2 days in Struga, to be back in Macedonia again, and to attend my first OSCE Southeast Europe Media Conference. It was enthusiastic. I would like to first thank all of you for joining us, for taking the time, for participating actively in very vibrant and dynamic discussions on a range of issues that affects media freedom in all the regions. This conference provided a necessary opportunity for an exchange of view on these very important topics. I think also for developing regional networking, which is very important. Each of the panelists gave us important insight into their area of expertise. There were as many questions raised as answers given, of course, which shows us that there is still much to be discussed in the coming months. I would like to use this opportunity at the end of this meeting to highlight some of the most important issues which were raised and of the main recommendations that we could support at the end of this conference. These recommendations that resulted from the panel presentations and the rich discussions that followed will provide concrete steps toward progress on strengthening media freedom in the region. There will be also guidelines for our own action as the Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media, and I'm sure it will be also very useful for the field mission of the OSCE in the region. Of course, the issue which dominated our discussion is clearly safety of journalists, and the shooting of Oliver Lakic was the latest latest reminder of the threats and violence that many journalists still face on a regular basis. Yesterday's joint declaration sent to her and to her colleague was a strong message of support and of solidarity with Oliveira and with the journalists at VGST, and it was also a call on authorities to do more to protect all journalists. And the first session of our conference, which was dedicated to this issue, bring many examples of the remaining attempt to safety of journalists. And this is something we see not only in this region, but unfortunately in the whole OSCE participating states. And especially it was put in evidence that investigative journalists face constant threats. And it is not a coincidence that the last 3 journalists killed in the OSCE region, Daphne Caruana Galizia in Malta, Jan Kuciak in Slovakia, and Maxim Borodin, who mysteriously fell from the 5th floor of his apartment in Russia, were all working on investigative story. Their work is the bedrock of democracy and is crucial for holding those in power into account. All these obstacles which are put in front of press freedom, of media freedom, are not only obstacles to press activities, they are obstacles to democracy, obstruction to the development of democracy in the country concerned and in all the region. It is not obstruction of journalists, it is obstruction to the democracy itself, and it is obstruction to the people. Crimes against journalists are crimes against democracy. I want to recall that both Daphne Caruana Galizia and Jan Kuciak had linked to our office. Daphne Caruana Galizia, after she was charged for defamation in February 2017, and Jan Kuciak, who many of you have met, as he was a participant at a number of our regional conferences in Belgrade, Vienna, Budapest, and was a member of our informal New Media Net network. So that's why we know very well that in most of the cases, there were threats before these attacks, and even first attacks, as it was the case for Oliveira before the shooting of this week. That's why one of the main recommendations is that any attacks or threats against investigative journalism must be an alarm call to the authorities, who must ensure that journalists work in a safe and secure environment. And here we don't only have recommendations, but strong demands to the authorities when it is about safety of journalists. I will just summarize them in 5 main demands. First, politicians and public officials must not create a hostile environment for the media through their statements and actions. Second, any threats must be looked at seriously and investigated. Third, impunity is not an option for democracies. Perpetrators and masterminds must be brought to justice. Fourth, it was clearly said that governments need to allocate adequate human and financial resources to investigations. Law enforcement, prosecutors and judges must be made aware of the necessity to treat attacks against journalists as a high priority, and we recommend that this is done also in cooperation with journalist organizations. 5, a special attention must be paid to safety of female journalists and to harassment online of female journalists. And this so includes very seriously the online attacks and threats. In response, the authorities and media outlets must also develop gender mainstreamed strategy to better ensure their safety and that we do not lose these essential voices in our society, because it was demonstrated that the specific threats against female journalists also can lead to self-censorship. The second big issue that was discussed in the second panel was the working conditions. Here it's about the concrete condition of works of the press, which is a condition of possibilities of developing of a real vivid media landscape. Journalists in the region face very grave problems when it comes to safeguarding their employment and social rights. It is obvious that journalists who are not secure when it comes to their employment could lack independence. We heard about the need to strengthen the role of the journalists' unions in ensuring collective rights. I was very happy to hear from the Journalists' Union of Macedonia that they had the support of Minister of Labour in their negotiation with the information agency to get to a collective agreement, and also in their attempt to have collective agreements with main media outlets. Unfortunately, there is too much resistance of media outlets, especially private media outlets, to accept to engage with trade unions in designing a collective agreement, which will be the condition for the journalists to develop their career in this profession. Better working conditions will reduce exposure to political and other forms of pressure. In many cases, media outlets themselves are under economic pressure, and they pass on this pressure to their employees. They face unfair market, politically controlled advertising, financial and tax inspection. And so this discussion also leads to the need for more transparency when it comes to media funding, especially when fundings come from public bodies. It is important that the authorities do not try to influence the media market through hidden subsidies. And we will provide in the coming months a paper of recommendations on public subsidies to press, which is necessary to ensure the development of local press, of course, public service broadcaster, but it has to be done in a transparent manner, and the issue, of course, of advertising and the use of public advertising is also very important. The third discussion was just on the issue of public service media, and it emphasizes the important role that they play in educating and informing our societies. I think there is also a link with the discussion which arose later, that was this morning, on fake news. Public service broadcasters are a key part of a strategy to promote quality of information and professional standards. But there is a need for restructuring of all the public media in the region to ensure their political independence and their financial sustainability. The governing bodies and staff must be selected on the basis of their professional qualities and not party loyalties. Public service media must also be at the forefront of fostering investigative journalism, and there have been some new initiatives very interesting in the region, in some of the PBS. They should support innovative ways to engage their audience. So, if I would say in a nutshell, financing, modernization through investment and training of personnel, and clear provision in law to ensure independence are key for the future of public services. The fourth discussion was a panel on self-regulation, and we heard about the challenges of transforming the current self-regulatory model to the online environment. First, there is a need to have, as much as possible, one self-regulatory body or press council in each country. There is some country where press polarization is such that there is a press council, but there is different ombudsman for other newspapers, even if they all refer to the same code of conduct. It's of course of utmost importance to all refer to the same professional standards and code of conduct, but it's even better if there is an agreement among all the media community and the journalist organization to work together in the same regulatory body, self-regulatory body. Self-regulation can really be an important tool to raise professional and ethical standards, and this is part of the battle to regain credibility for the media. Digital literacy strategies are important to ensure that journalists and media actors as well as the public are able to effectively engage in media self-regulation. Journalists' code of ethics should reflect the changing media landscape, and efforts should be made for their consistent implementation. The sustainability of press council should be a priority for the media community given their essential role in facilitating media self-regulation. And it's very interesting to know that in some countries there is now an ongoing work on the regulation of online comments, for example, like in Montenegro with the support of the OSCE mission. The panel on digitalization highlighted the basic human rights and rights related to freedom of expression and access to information need to be safeguarded online just as they are offline. Technological advances foster the democratization of the media, expanding the possibilities to express oneself and delivering new faster to audience. Media should continue focusing on quality rather than fast delivery. And this is not an easy issue because, as it was recalled in this panel this morning, fake news is not only bad journalism, but sometimes it can be seen as a kind of business model for some of the media companies, and I think that it was Ramsey who recalled it. So there is a kind of resistance which is needed from the media community and the journalists to explain that it's not the way we will get to quality of information. Of course, we are in the time of speed in everything, but if we want quality of democracy, we need quality of information, and we need sometimes to take the time to check. There was a presentation of a lot of fact-checking initiatives in the region. This is very important, and here too the cooperation among the media community will be key. The last panel of the day was on the so-called fake news issue. And states should not, it was insisted on the fact that states should not adopt legal bans on fake news, which is not a legal concept, because this could be counterproductive and prone to abuse. On the contrary, it is most important to use existing laws, including on civil defamation, and to provide adequate legal remedies for the dissemination of false information which could harm reputation, or for any kind of strategy to use false information to create political trouble. The best way to counter disinformation is by creating a free, independent and diverse communication environment, and to promote media literacy in the society, especially in education program. We also need internet intermediaries to have clear policies for restricting or deleting content. This should meet, as a minimum, due process guarantees and international standards on freedom of expression. It is very important that ultimately there is appeal mechanism and that the judiciary can decide if it is legitimate or not to have blocking of website or take down of content, and we cannot transfer this responsibility just to the internet company, and we must be very careful to the abuse of that kind of policy. Of course, in the fight against terrorist propaganda or hate speech or manipulation of information, there can be, if it's provided by law and in respect of international standard, some kind of restriction, but we must take care not to lose in the meantime the benefit of freedom of expression and freedom of the media as it was permitted by the development of the internet. And in the region especially, we have seen how a lot of new online media have been created with these internet tools much more easily than it would have been in the past with the classical printed press. So we will publish in the coming weeks a paper of recommendation on internet regulation in the region, which we will address to the governments and to the state to try to organize a regional discussion and to promote a coherent approach in the region. These are just some of the issues that I have noted from our discussions. The conclusions and recommendations reflect what many of us have already stated in different fora, but what is important is that they are followed and implemented. And these recommendations will also help me in my discussion with the government in the region. Over the next few weeks, we will work on more detailed sets of conclusion on different of this issue, and this will be also the real outcome of this conference, and we will, of course, share these recommendations with all of you. These conclusions and recommendations will also support the important work of the OSCE missions, which are already working on all of this issue on the ground. All of the missions have safety of journalists as their first priority and are engaged with the authority and the media community to help improve the situation. This is also an area where we work together very closely, and we will work with the OSCE missions on the different concrete priorities. I want just to recall that the OSCE mission to Skopje is working also on media and digital literacy and support to the public service media in their programming for small and non-majority media communities. That the OSCE presence in Albania is supporting the restructuring of the public service broadcaster and strengthening of economic and social rights to journalists. The mission to Bosnia and Herzegovina will also focus on safety of female journalists and on improving links between the media and law enforcement agency, support to the public broadcasting system, and media literacy for students and youth, including in little towns and cities. Mission in Kosovo is supporting establishment of a commission that will support investigations into the killings of journalists between 1998 and 2005, following similar models in Serbia and in Montenegro. And it is also focusing on support to media with an emphasis on non-majority media and female journalists, support to media supervisory bodies and public service media, media literacy, and expanding the media and public relation capacity of public institutions. Mission to Montenegro also supports public service media, media self-regulation, and media literacy. Mission to Serbia is supporting the development of a new media strategy, which I discussed with the authority when I paid a visit a few weeks ago, and is focusing on a broad range of actions to support media literacy. From this extensive list, it is clear that our missions are there to support you and to support the authority in strengthening media freedom. And I would like to thank the authorities of all the states of the region for supporting this conference, for being ready to hear from its recommendation, and for working with the OSCE mission on their media program. Also, all the OSCE participating states that I want to thank for their financial support to us in organizing this event and our activities in the region, and most notably Netherlands and Austria for this specific conference. I also want to specially thank the mission, the OSCE mission to Skopje, of course, which helped in every way possible in the preparation and the organization of this event. The head of mission, Jeffrey Goldstein, and his team, Joanna, Meio, and Stefan, who you have been working with for the 2 past days, and all the drivers who bring us here to be on time and to be ready to concentrate on our meeting. Thanks also to all the OSCE missions who have all organized panels and sessions and help to bring experts and knowledge from the whole region. Thank you also to the technical staffs, interpreters and hotel staff who ensure that we are able to do all of this. And of course, I want to thank my team, which pulled all of this together. And here, especially, I want to thank for the preparation and not only for their work during these 2 days, Addis and Jennifer, Sejal, Denise and Franny. Lastly, I want to thank all of you who contributed as speakers, moderators, participants to the discussion for sharing your knowledge and your experience. Thank you for being actors of the democratic transformation of the region, actors of building more safe, open and democratic society. And I look forward to continuing our discussion at another time, in another place, which I sure will be as exciting as was Struga in Macedonia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desir. And with this, we can close this two-day conference. Thank you all very much for participating, and I would like to invite you for lunch.